Hello and welcome back to our PoriScript tutorial series. Today we are going to be talking about creating multi-choice message boxes to give our player a little bit more options. So in our last video we created this starter setup, but when you wanted to change between the regions, Professor Birch would just kind of cycle through them one at a time. But we can actually create a multi-choice box that are used in the game pretty frequently. It's just a little bit more difficult than declaring a static message in the way that we've been doing it. And it's not as easy as the yes/no option in the message box either. So we are going to get into it. I've written this script, obviously, that does it for us, and we're going to walk through how it works. So we are only changing the Professor Birch script on the the Pori file for this map that we're using. This is the only script that we're going to be changing here, but we will be changing 4 other C documents that I will obviously talk about where the location of them are, what the location of the files are. But for this file, it's whatever file you're working in, wherever you want the multi-choice box to be. So we are, because of the setup that we are doing here, we only want it to happen when all of the flags are unset when you haven't picked up a Pokeball, because otherwise Professor Birch is going to say take care of your Pokemon because you've already gotten one. So as you see in the last video, I had all of my flags like this. They were all showing as unused because I hadn't renamed them. You really should be renaming the flags that you take over, the unused flags, and the variables, because it's just way more readable. And if you're doing a lot of scripting, you're quickly going to lose track of what has been edited and what has been used. So right now I'm going to show you a quick way. If you go into the search bar in VS Code and you paste your phrase, you can just find and replace right here. And my caps lock key is on that way. So I can replace all 6 instances of Starter Ball 3, and now instead of having that ugly flag, it replaces everything with Starter Ball 1 or Starter Ball 3, and I did it with these first 2 as well. It also replaces it in PoriMap. When you reload into PoriMap, it might give you a little error, but you just hit reload, and it'll actually switch the flags for you. If it doesn't, then you'll want to make sure to, but it should do it automatically because PoriMap's pulling from a file that VS Code has access to when you've opened your folder. You have to have opened your folder, not just a single file. In VS Code, you have to have the whole folder open, like this view here. But anyway, so we have our flags named now just to be a little more concise. So if none of the flags are set, then we will start our message box script. We will lock, we will face the player, then we will start a message. This is different from message box. Message box actually calls message. It calls this, but usually like it'll add something to it. Like for the message box NPC, it'll call the message, but it'll also add this lock and face player, and then the release when it's done, I believe, as well. So the message box NPC uses this message command. It just puts a message box on the screen with the text. That's all it does. It won't remove the message box. We have to manually close the message. All it does is put the message box on the screen. So these broader commands like message box use this command inside of them. But because the multi-choice command only creates this box here, we have to add this text down here ourselves separately. And we want it to happen at a specific time and leave at a specific time, which doesn't really coincide that well with any of the defaults for message box, at least as far as I'm aware. So it's easier just to write message and then the message and then close message right after the multi-choice. That way they both pop up at the same time and they both go away right at the same time. So that is how we're going to declare the message down here. But the multi-choice itself, it functions with the multi-choice command. If we go into event.inc, which is in ASM macros, event.inc again, it should be inside of your pokeemerald directory. if we search for multi-choice, we can see here the macro, it creates a multi-choice box where you can have a selection, but the options are predefined in S multi-choice lists. And you have to specify them with a multi-choice ID. Now this is this multi-choice starter choice thing I have written here. This is the ID, and you'll have to create that yourself, and we'll go over it in a second. But the macro for multi-choice, it takes an X position and a Y position first. We are at 25.5, and that prints it right about here. It's coming from the top left corner, so it's 25.5, and it's, I believe, in the top left corner as well of the multi-choice box that it's reading from. So it's top left to top left, as far as I'm aware. So we have the X and the Y, then we have the multi-choice ID, which is the actual content of the multi-choice box, what goes inside of it. And then we have ignore B button press, which we will set to 0, which means that you can back out of the message box, but if you don't want to be able to back out of the message box, then this has to be non-zero. So if you want them to be stuck in it, then you put it as a 1 or something, or 15. I would just put it as a 1. But anyway, we also have multi-choice default, which does the same thing, except it takes a positional requirement for the default before the ignore button be pressed, so that you can set a default position where like the cursor's on the box where it first opens, as you see here, the initial position. And that's just if you have a particularly long list. There is in the simple modifications directory on Poke Community for the decomps, there's a tutorial on how to make a scrolling list, which is going to be beyond the scope of this video, but if you were to do something like that, then this would be more useful for you. There's also the multi-choice grid, which does a similar thing, but it allows you to create a grid, and you can specify a constant for how many are allowed on each row. So like 3 on each row, and then it keeps going down. But we're not going to be using that one today. We're going to just be using the regular old multi-choice. And so we declare it like we do all of our macros, multi-choice, and then in parentheses we have our first, second, third, and fourth arguments, the X, the Y, the ID, and the flag for the B button. Now we are going to talk about this multi-starter choice constant. So this constant is defined in script menu.h. It is an include constants script menu.h, and then I have written it down here. I've scrolled down to the bottom of this list of multi-choice IDs, and these are all the multi-choice options in the game. And I have created I have just added down here after 113, I have added a 114 multi-starter choice, and that's the name I decided to give mine. Now, looking through these names, it's actually probably easier to look here. These, we also have to edit this file. These right here are the individual, these are the individual strings for each one, for each bit of the, for each option in the multi-choice. Here are the constants given to the that hold the text, and then here this is the structs that hold all of the group of they hold them all together in a group, in a structure, a menu action structure. And we can see these are the options that you can call, basically, and their contents. So this multi-choice list, Mechadoll 2, lets you choose between the Trick House, Mechadoll, Poochiana 3, blah, 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 blah. The Briny Off to Dewford multi-choice lets you choose the text Dewford and text exit. The multi-choice status info lets you choose text poison, paralysis, sleep, burn, frozen, exit. You can choose between the mock, and the acro bike in the bike list. Things like that. You can choose the type of contest that you are entering. And these are choices that you can make these are all pre-created lists, and you can add them in here if you want to choose one of these. But we are using one that doesn't currently exist, so we have to create our own, and that's what this next part is going to be about. So I've just gone over all the files in brief passing. These names here are the same names in this original one here, and they're used as the index in this array. So this array here is what we're choosing from, and when you assign a constant here a number and you do it in order like this, we can then use this this constant, this define, as a positional argument when we're creating this array. An array is like an ordered list of something. In this case, they're structures. So we are creating this ordered list of multi-choice structures, and we are using the position that we define in this first script menu.h file. So since we're adding one to the bottom, we need to add the define at the bottom at a higher number. If we wanted to stick it somewhere in the middle for some reason, we would have to change all of these numbers, because otherwise there would be no point in sticking it in the middle. It would override a different option. So we are just going to add our define down at the bottom of this file, and then we are going to go to strings.c. This is in source strings.c, and then we are going to scroll down to the bottom of this one as well, and here we are adding our actual text. So just copy the bottom entry here and paste it again, and then change the text to what you want the text to be, and change the name of the variable to be whatever you want the name of the variable to be. So I added Johto starter, Hoenn starter, Kanto starter, and I added Johto, Hoenn, and Kanto. And as you can see, these are the options that appear here. These are all of the texts in the game. Well, not all of the text in the game, obviously, but this is a lot of the text in the game. In this file, not all of it is related to these multi-choice things, but this is just, strings.c. It's a huge part of the game text is in this file that we access from, and the game access from other scripts where it's not defined directly in the script. But anyway, in strings.h, we have to actually declare the variables. So here in strings.c, we probably should have done strings.h first. Here we are setting these constant u8s to this value, but in strings.h we were actually declaring these as existing. We're like, here is this variable, it is a extern const u8 g text, and this is the name, obviously. It is one of these types, and this is its name. And here we are going to just, copy the bottom one and replace it with text Johto starter, text Hoenn starter, or whatever you want your variables, whatever you want them to be called, because you might not be doing this exact thing. You might be doing a different, a whole different reason for doing multi-choice. But anyway, so we need the variables declared here, and then we can assign them values here. And then in script menu.h, we saw all these structs here that hold the lists. We are going to, add on to the bottom of the structs. This last one is multi-choice list exit, and we are going to create our own. And it's going to be the same, you can just copy and paste and just follow the same format. It's a static construct menu action, which is the type of structure that it is. Make sure to watch our C tutorials if you haven't, if you're confused about any of the C, but you don't really need to know what it means to actually create this message box. But you need to add your text objects that you defined in the strings.h and that you gave values in the strings.c. You need to add them in order of how you want them to appear inside of this structure. So this is the structure defined for your new multi-choice box. Now you need to add it to the multi-choice lists by going to this again and copying and pasting the last line down here, replacing the positional argument with the define that you made inside of script menu.h. and then replacing the struct of the menu action struct with the name here, multi-choice starters, the name of the menu action struct that you are using. So here we have multi-choice underscore starter underscore choice is equal to multi-choice list underscore starters. And that is all that we need to do to add our multi-choice option. So we have defined, defined position or defined variables to hold each option. Then we have given each option a value to be stored. We have defined a position to store the whole thing inside of the menu options list. Then we have defined a menu action list, a multi-choice list itself containing the three variables we created, and you could obviously have more than three. And then we added the list, the menu action list, into the multi-choice list structure so that we could call it from our scripts.pori. Now that this is here, this number that we put here, we could replace it with the number 114 or whatever it was. Basically, when this is calling the code, when multi-choice is running, it's going to be interacting with this structure, and it's going to be looking at it in the position that we give it, which the position that we give it is going to be multi-choice, multi-starter choice. So it's going to get this result back. It's going to get this instead of something else. This is what's going to be given back to it when we give the argument as this this value here. It's going to be accessing that part, and then the multi-choice function knows what to do with that information to draw our multi-choice box. Anyway, that was a little long-winded, but that is how the multi-choice command works and how we can add new multi-choice options for it. After we use it, like I said, you want to close the message. Since we opened it manually, you have to close it. It doesn't need any position, or it doesn't need any arguments, because it closes the last message on screen. Now the multi-choice command gives us a result in var result, and that result is equal to the position of the choice that you selected. So if you choose the first option, it's 0 because it's 0 indexed. As far as I'm aware, it works, so it's 0 indexed. Then Dojoto is the first position, Hoenn is the second position, so 0, 1, 2. So if var result is equal to 0, then we will call this thing that just fades us in and out. It's just this script here I wrote really quickly: fade screen, fade to black, delay 20 frames, fade screen, fade from black, return, just so that it gives us a little bit of an effect when we actually change the starter, so it doesn't look like they just magically changed with nothing actually happening to them. So we call that, and then we set var starter region, which is our new name for our variable that holds the region, to 2, because that is the, if we are picking Canto, 2 is what we have here in our Pokeball scripts. In Pokeball 1, 2, 3, if you remember our last video. If you're confused about that logic, watch that video, because I'm not going to get into it much. But setting our var to region here, if you remember in our last video, our new professor script, it was like a loop that kept adding to this variable, the starter region variable. It was called something different, but it kept adding to it mod 2 or mod 3. And we now here we can set it much more directly. We just set it to the variable. We just set the variable instead of add var. We're just setting it because we have we have the full discrete option, so we can set it. It's not just, yes, we want to change the options list, so cycle through it. It's, this is the exact option I want. So here, we set var to 1 because 1 is the Totodile, Totodile's Johto, 1 is Johto. 2 is Squirtle, Squirtle is Kanto, but we're 0. 0 is that one. 0 is Mudkip, Mudkip is Hoenn, Hoenn is 2. I just confused myself there. But so the multi-choice is giving 0, 1, 2, and then we're setting our variable depending on the region we want to select from this multi-choice. And like I said, we just call this fade thing just to fade it in and out, just so it looks a little nicer. We're gonna, the same message box that says choose wisely, we'll put on the screen like we had in the last video. We'll wait the message and then we'll release. In the else, we're going to do message box NPC. I'm using this message box here on this one because I have the lock and the face player and the message up here, this lock and face player stuff. It's outside, it's inside of the if. So this message box doesn't have any of that. But the message box NPC doesn't need it. It automatically locks and faces the player and unlocks after the message box is over, so you don't actually need to write it yourself when you're using the message box NPC. And since we're not drawing anything on the screen when you don't have any starters to choose from, it doesn't matter. So we don't have to have anything special for that one. We can just use the regular message box. We don't have to use message. So that's that whole script. There's just that little thing right there. That's all we changed on this. We didn't change anything inside of Pokeemerald. We just changed this script here, and then we added our options to these four files to make our menu list available. So here in Pokeemerald, well, I'm going a little fast there. As you can see, we have our options. If I choose Johto, it fades in and fades out, and then says choose wisely. I can go here, and there's Chikorita. Here's Totodile. If I click on the professor, Kanto, fades in, fades out, choose wisely, Charmander, back to Hoenn, fade in, fade out, choose wisely. I don't want to. If you back out, he just says choose wisely. I'm going to now pick Torchic. Not going to give it a name. If I click on him now, it says take care of your Pokemon. If I move, he faces player, even though, like I said, there's no face player here. Because it's the NPC message box, it does it automatically, and it also locks. I can't move right now because I am locked in place. But as soon as I let go, I can finally walk out and I can leave. And then of course there's our rival setup that we did in one of our last videos as well, but we're not going to worry about that. So that is, that's message boxes, or multi-choice message boxes, multi-choice lists, I should say. If you have any questions about them, make sure to leave a comment, but otherwise we are going to end the video here because I am just rambling at this point. If you have any comments, make sure to leave them. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one.